When I married Brian, my hunka, as I like to call him, I was so crazy about him and still am. And we became a blended family with my biological daughter and then my 3 stepchildren who were living in Ohio at the time. And we wanted to have a child together biologically, and it was became apparent pretty soon that that was not going to be in our future. Then our hearts were open to adoption, but we didn't really have the resources to pursue it, and we just didn't know what that would all look like. We were older, and we thought, okay, we just kind of set it at God's feet, and we said, okay, Lord, if you have this for us, then open the door. I was traveling and speaking and doing different retreats, and we thought, well, if we should come across a young woman who needed adoptive parents, then we would be so willing. That was where our heart was. And it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. So we thought, okay, maybe this is not what's in our future, and we were okay with that. There was sadness in it, but we were also okay with it. We started dreaming about Harleys and traveling the world, and yeah, that probably wasn't going to happen either, but at least having some fun adventures together as we launched all of our kids. But then I was at a retreat, and there was a young woman who was pregnant, and there was another person there who knew about that dream that we had tucked away, and they connected the two of us because that young woman, the baby's father had passed away suddenly, and she was considering adoption. And so all of a sudden this dream began to, it was amazing how quickly it came up and consumed our hearts and our mind. But as I began meeting with this girl, she was local, I knew that she was supposed to keep her baby. I knew she was scared and that she felt overwhelmed, but she also had a great support system, a family who loved her, and she was a smart, strong woman, and I just knew that with that support system, she would be able to raise her little boy. And so it was with just heartbreak, but also knowing it was the right thing, that we walked that together, and she kept her little boy, and that was just exactly as it was supposed to be. But during that time, I had woken up one day and I thought, Nathaniel, if God would give us a little boy, I want to name him Nathaniel. And so so several months later, I was at a retreat speaking in Arizona. I overhear the pastor's wife speaking with another woman. She said, yes, she had an adoptive family picked out and it didn't work out, and she doesn't know quite what to do now. And my ears kind of perked up a little bit. And then the woman said, yeah, it's a sad thing. She even has a name picked out, and his name is Nathaniel. And oh my, I just had goosebumps all over. I was like, really? And so at the end of the retreat, I approached her and I said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I heard of your situation and this was our situation, and we had the name picked out, and it turns out you have the same name, and maybe this is supposed to be. And so she was very excited, and I was very excited, Brian was very excited, and so I went back home and we immediately began doing the home study, getting prepared, getting everything ready, and almost immediately there was some distance from the birth mom, and she was a little hesitant and a little obviously scared, and so but we just held on to what we felt like God had told us, which was to move forward. So we made a countdown calendar. It was a 90-day countdown calendar. We were crossing out the days. We were getting our home ready. And at 40 days out, I said, okay, we're 40 days out. I want to do something special, like fast chocolate, or I couldn't think of something good enough, but just to prepare our hearts for what we felt like was coming. And so I just felt like God said, okay, praise, 40 days of praise. And that's not something I would normally think of. So I was like, okay. And I used to do graffiti in high school back in the day. And yeah, I'm sure you'll hear more of my shady past as we go. But girls used to pay me $5 to write their names on the bathroom walls. So I'm hoping the statute of limitations has expired on that, because I confessed to the whole world. So I began doing graffiti in the mornings in a sketchbook with just different aspects of God's goodness, love, compassion, kindness, goodness. And I would write that out in graffiti and then just write different things about his goodness around that every single day for 40 days. Well, the day came for this baby boy to be born, Nathaniel, and we waited. We didn't hear anything that day. The next day we found out that she had given him to a family that she'd never met. So to go into how heartbreaking that was, I can't even begin to tell you how much our heart was broken. But at the same time, we'd been praising God and talking about his goodness for 40 days. And so it was like my feet were grounded in that, in his goodness, and that he had me, and I didn't understand it, and Brian didn't understand it, and we were sad, but we also were trusting that somehow that God was doing something, and we had to trust him. And so a lot of tears were cried in that season. But a couple of weeks later, I received a call from a friend whose daughter had been on a mission trip to Haiti. And she called me, she said, "Elsa, I don't know if you're even ready to hear this, but my daughter came back from this trip and she had fallen in love with a little boy there. And I know your story. And anyway, his name is Nathaniel. And could it be your Nathaniel is in Haiti?" And my heart had been a little damaged by that point, and I thought, I don't think so. But I was also open, and Brian was as well, and we just said, okay, maybe, but we certainly don't have the resources to pursue international adoption. I mean, that's just way beyond our means. And it was 2 days later that we received a call from someone who had experienced a great tragedy and wanted to bring some beauty out of that tragedy. And she didn't know us, but she wanted to come alongside us. She had heard our story and wanted to come alongside us in our adoption financially. And suddenly that excuse was completely taken away, and we had just heard about Haiti, so we said, okay, we'll take this step. I mean, that had not even been on our radar to consider international adoption. We went to Haiti, and it turns out Nathaniel was already in the process of being adopted, but they had just rescued a little boy named Lovins from a mountain village and had been praying for an adoptive family. And the way our situation had unfolded, it seemed so serendipitous. But of course, we're hesitant. He was a boy who was rescued near death and had very unique special needs. And did we have the capacity to care for him? And we went there and we met him. And we met another little boy named Lawrence who also had been abandoned at that same time, because we thought if we're going to bring one of one race home, then we want to have two, so that they have some similarities and some things that they can share together. And so we met these two little boys and just fell in love. And we began the process. We started getting approved, and switching from domestic to international adoption, doing research, visiting these boys. I spent a month there in Haiti, just getting to know them and understand them a little bit. And then several months later, I was at home when I received a text from my mom, and she said, "Elsa, call me, it's important." As it turns out, a woman had called her church, and she was a lovely young woman, had adoptive parents chosen for her unborn child, and something had fallen through and she was looking for parents. And people knew of our story of adopting from Haiti and that we might also be open to this. So our minds were just spinning a little. We're like, okay, wait, we're in process for the two boys, and what's happening in all this? Well, we said, okay, well, let's call. Let's make the call. So it was one of the most awkward calls I've ever made. I called and spoke to this lovely young woman, and it's like an awkward first date. I said, hi, my name is Elsa, and we've heard about your story, and I don't know if we are the ones, but I was blogging at that time about our adoption journey. I said, you can look online, you can see us. We're older parents. We're adopting 2 boys from Haiti. Would you just take a look at our family's journey? And so she did that. And Brian, in the meantime, Brian and I were just praying and thinking, okay, is this what's next? Anyway, she called back and she said, I have read your story, and I would be so honored if you and Brian would raise my baby girl. Oh, my word. Well, as it turns out, she was living in Orlando at the time, and I was scheduled already to fly into Orlando on her due date to speak at a church. So, and that was 5 days from when we received the phone call. So I was, I had a speaking engagement in Texas, and then I flew to Orlando on her due date. We met at a Denny's. She was a beautiful young woman, blonde hair, blue eyes, ready to pop. It was her due date. And we just connected in such a sweet way. And she told me about herself, and she told me her heart for her daughter and how she wanted her baby girl to have a life, and a life that she could not provide for her at the time. So I called Brian and we processed it through and prayed it through some more, and within 24 hours he was on the road driving to Orlando. Several days after that, she went into labor, and we were in the hospital room next to her, and then she was so gracious, she allowed us to actually be in the room when Savannah was born, and Brian got to cut the cord. I can't describe to you the feeling of holding our little girl for the first time, and knowing that she was ours, and that God had set her in our arms. And the reality was, without what had unfolded with Nathaniel and the boys, we would not have been ready, paperwork-wise, heart-wise, for this incredible gift that we were given. We stayed in Florida about 7 weeks, and while we were there, we got word that Wilna had been brought to the orphanage, and would we consider adopting her as well? What began as a domestic adoption that was heartbreaking loss ended up with us adopting Savannah and also 3 more children from Haiti. And it's really been beautiful because each story has been cemented in some unique way. We just needed those confirmations that this is what He has, because otherwise we know we won't be able to do it. It just has to be something that God planned and designed for our family. He has built this family in such a beautiful way. And one of the ways that we knew that He gave us, it was such a gift. Remember those 40 days of praise that I did in preparation for Nathaniel? Well, when we calculated Savannah's due date, we found out that she was actually conceived on the day I began my 40 days of praise. So God, even knowing the heartbreak that would come with Nathaniel, was already preparing the good gift of Savannah Grace. Meeting a girl in the midst of her own pain and loss and feeling overwhelmed, a young woman who wouldn't know what to do. God already had a plan for her, and He already had a plan for us, and He had a plan for Savannah Grace. Not only that, but 2,500 miles away, in the same week that I began my 40 days of praise, God was rescuing a little boy and weaving our family together, knowing that He was going to set this young survivor into our hearts and our lives. And for Wilna, I mean, it's just amazing to me. We wanted so tenderly to hold her, and I mean, to take a child from another culture into your own, and all the trauma that involves, not to mention leaving your birth family and your friends that you've known in the orphanage. We wanted to make sure this was the best thing for that little girl, and so we just set it at God's feet. And I mean, we were told it would be absolutely impossible to add her to our adoption file. It is amazing what God did. I mean, literally the highest parts of the Haitian government got involved and added this little girl to our file in 1 day's time. That is literally unheard of. And so even though we were willing, our hands were open, we just wanted what was best, and God set her directly into our hearts and into our lives and into our family. And we cannot believe what an incredible honor it is to raise these children and to be a part of their lives. And then we had a similar situation with Lawrence in that we had to let him go. His mom came and took him from the orphanage after 3.5 years into the process, and I just ached for her heart. She was a young mom, and the idea of adoption scared her, and I get that. And she said no. And so we were trying to think of ways, okay, how can we love him there? What does that look like? Our hearts were just broken over his loss, because we'd been pursuing him for 3.5 years, but at the same time, he was not our son yet. And we wanted to honor his mom, his birth mom, and her journey. And so in our hearts, we really had to give him back. And then we had gone for a visit to see the other two, and in just I know what was an agonizing decision for this young mom. I know she thought about it and prayed about it and wanted what was best for her son. And I am blown away and honored that she chose us to be his best, and changed her mind, and has given us that opportunity to raise him. But it was one of those, felt like we had to let him go before we ultimately received him back. And so all that's left is for us to say, yes, absolutely, we will do everything we can to love these children to adulthood. And it's so beautiful to me, because see if I can keep it together, sorry. Every member of our family, from Brian and I, to our bigs, to our littles, have come into this family as a result of loss and grief. Losing our original marriages for Brian and I, for the bigs, having to walk through those divorces and all the pain that's involved in that. For our littles to lose their birth families. We don't underestimate how huge that loss is. And even my precious mom, having walked through the loss of my dad, and coming to join our family, and for us to live together and do life together. So out of each of our losses, God has woven a story of family, and it's my great honor, and it's my hope and prayer that we will enjoy a ton of laughter, great joy, walking through sadness together, and somehow bind up each other's wounds so that we can go on to live the full lives, so our children can go on to live the full lives that God intended for them.
So, Lovey, do you think you could love this little boy for all of your days?
This little boy all my days?
All of your days?
I could love this little boy forever and ever.
Aww.